Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
This is a Roger Stone, and this is the Roger Stone Show on WABC Radio. If you're in the greater New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area where I grew up, you can find us at 770 on the AM dial. If you're out of town, you can listen to the entire show either now or even later in download at WABCradio.com. If you're listening now, go to your cell phone and either call or text your friends, one somebody in your family, and tell them to tune in to 770 AM or to go online at WABC Radio, because you're not going to want to miss this show. Today I have the singular honor of having the greatest mayor in New York City history, Rudy Giuliani, and his son, Andrew Giuliani, who ran a valiant and I think distinguished race for governor of New York, a young man whose greatest public service, without any question, lies ahead. Now, many people know that the name Stone is a name plucked out of thin air by some Irish clerk at Ellis Island, and that my real last family name is Corbo, C-O-R-B-O, and we are from Sicily. Therefore, you could call this segment Three Italian Guys Sitting Around Talking. I want to honor Rudy Giuliani and Andrew Giuliani to the Roger Stone Show. Mayor, thank you so much for doing this.
Roger, I'm sure we're being tape recorded.
Of that, there is no doubt. Probably by people beyond those at WABC.
Right.
Andrew, thanks for joining us on the show.
Well, Roger, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the distinguished introduction. You know, just a few minutes ago on my show here, I was saying between, Rudy Giuliani and Roger Stone, I don't know what I'm doing with this threesome right here, but I'll tell you what, we're going to have a whole lot of fun, that's for sure.
We are.
Well, it's a Roger Stone party. If you're invited, you're indicted. So what can I say? So let's dive right into this. Rudy Giuliani, a graduate of Manhattan College and New York University Law School, former assistant U.S. attorney. I was a lowly volunteer in his first campaign for mayor, a race that he lost narrowly to David Dinkins. Dinkins was not a bad mayor. He was just a bad man. He was just a terrible mayor. And, of course, Rudy Giuliani came back for a rematch to win that office at a time when people were saying New York City was over, that the problems of New York in terms of both taxes, housing, and particularly crime were just intractable, that we had to live with less. We had to live in a dangerous, dirty, filthy, dysfunctional place. But Rudy Giuliani challenged that narrative, challenged that thinking. I knew Ed Koch, also not a bad guy, but On the show today, we have the greatest mayor in New York City. I've said it before in introducing him in various crowds. I say it again today. So, Mayor, let's jump right into it. Big city crime is a major issue these days. Just doesn't seem to be getting any better. You have a track record in this area that is the envy of every mayor, every police chief across America. What's the best advice you would give a mayor or a police chief to begin to solve these problems like you did in 1994, 1995 when you became mayor? And while you're at it, elaborate on what the broken window theory of policing is.
Sure. I mean, a lot of it has to do with the broken windows theory and their misunderstanding of it. But really, it's an easier problem than it was, Roger, back in the day that you're talking about, because we do have a game plan that we can look at, not just in New York, but throughout the country where crime went all the way down. And the reality is, and I know this will sound partisan, but the hell with it, it's the truth. This is a product of the thinking of the modern so-called progressive Democrat Party, which is not very progressive at all. It's extremely retrogressive. It's a basically indulge the criminal at all costs philosophy. Maybe because they want the vote, maybe because they think they can be more appealing to the minority voter that way. I don't know what their thinking is, but this is a produced crime wave, produced by Democrats. And some of it is exacerbated by 2020, the example of 2020. Criminals watch television like everyone else does. And when they saw that you could walk into a store, take everything out, and the cops did nothing, they just wrote it down. And it was being, if not encouraged, certainly excused by Biden, Harris, and everybody else. It then entered into what they did in their cities, in their towns. And we went through the Defund the Police movement, the Black Lives Matter movement. All those things have created where we are today. And they have to be deconstructed. I mean, what we need are mayors and police commissioners. It sounds simple, who will enforce the law. And they don't have to do it strictly. They don't have to become monsters. But when you get arrested for stabbing somebody, you should be held, and you should be tried quickly, and you should go to jail for a period of time, depending on your background. You shouldn't be put back out on the street in 3 hours, which is what is happening in New York. There are 7,000 people, roughly, that are walking the streets of New York right now. Could be more, that would be in jail when I was the mayor or when Bloomberg and Kelly were in charge, that are now walking the streets and creating the crime that is frightening the living daylights out of New Yorkers. And that number keeps increasing. They put criminals on the street, and it's worse some places than New York. That philosophy has to be changed, and we have to go back to enforcing the law in a disciplined, sensible way, and recognizing that there are some people, the only way you're going to stop them from committing crimes is by putting them behind bars. You leave them out on the street, and these career criminals will violate hundreds and hundreds of people.
This is, if you're just joining us, this is WABC Radio. This is the Roger Stone Show. In our second hour, Kimberly Guilfoyle joins us. She is, of course, the fiancée of Donald Trump Jr., but more importantly, she is the star of the Kimberly Guilfoyle Show on Rumble, an experienced broadcaster, many, many years at Fox, longtime friend of mine, but the fiercest MAGA warrior of them all. She joins us later. Also joining us, Buffalo Congressman Chris Collins. If you think what they did to General Flynn was an outrage, if you think what they did to me was an outrage, wait till you hear what they did to Congressman Chris Collins, a man who actually never did anything wrong, spent a brief period of time in a federal penitentiary, a federal lockup, only to be pardoned as an act of both justice and mercy by President Donald Trump. Chris Collins joins us in our second hour. Andrew Giuliani, people don't understand how all-consuming a race for statewide office, particularly in a large state like New York can be. You have the added burden of being the son of a famous father. That's an extraordinarily difficult burden. Let me give you an example. Governor Tom Kean of New Jersey, my first solo client as a political consultant, elected in 1981 by 1,209 votes out of 2.5 million cast, was a great two-term governor of New Jersey. His son, Tom Kean Jr., served in the state Senate, now in the House. I liked young Tom, but recently he voted against the motion to censure Adam Schiff. A disappointment. I'm hoping that things will improve. I didn't know you before you ran for governor. I was prepared to think, well, this guy worked in the Trump White House and spent some time as a professional golfer. I got to tell you, your campaign in terms of messaging, in terms of discipline, in terms of energy, in terms of drive, in terms of purpose, really blew me away. And I particularly liked the classy way in which you accepted a close defeat, but then you warmly endorsed and campaigned for the Republican who defeated you, which is the way you move forward in this business. Tell people what running for governor of a state like New York is like.
Well, Roger, first off, thank you for the compliments. It, like I said before, it means a whole lot coming from you. You know, I think one of the things that when you think about being the son of a, famous father, somebody who's accomplished so much, as you said, the greatest mayor in the history of New York, one of the greatest prosecutors in the history of our country. The one thing that I am aided by is that Hunter Biden has set the bar so low these days that as long as I have not done cocaine in the White House library, I'm considered to be a success by many. I'm kidding around, obviously. There, let me get back to the question that you have at hand there. When you think about a state like New York and the 62 counties, and you think about how different some of those counties are, like New York County in Manhattan, where we've elected a district attorney like an Alvin Bragg by 80% of the vote. And then other places, when you start going to Western New York and you start going into the Adirondacks and you start going into the Uticas of the world, where you have a lot of blue collar, feels like you're really in Midwestern America in many ways. It feels almost more like what many would think of an Ohio and a Michigan and a Wisconsin. It really is multiple strategies depending on where you are in the state in terms of trying to get your vote out. What's the messaging? Because what people may be dealing with as a challenge in New York City, let's say some of the rogue district attorneys, they're not necessarily dealing with that. Let's say if you go up to Clinton County, which is up north by Plattsburgh, for them, in many places, they're dealing with kind of the shutdowns of so much of our penitentiary system there. And that's really a main job producer in so much of Western and Northern New York. In New York City, we're obviously seeing the deterioration of the quality of life, which my father, Rudy, just covered here recently. You can think about just recently this guy who actually reported somebody on his phone at the convenience store who worked there stealing $500 worth of stuff. What ends up happening? They don't arrest the guy. They actually take the guy who reported it and fired him. And sadly, that's what we're dealing with in so many of these cities. And in terms of, after I realized that that the people had chosen Congressman Zeldin to be the Republican nominee, it was about 2 seconds where I thought, what would be a better future for my daughter and my family? Would it be better if we had conservative principles espoused by my opponent, Lee Zeldin, or would it be better if Kathy Hochul was running our state as she is right now, where we're seeing more and more New Yorkers leave for the likes of Florida and Texas and Tennessee, where we're seeing, sadly, crime and quality of life deteriorate, where we're seeing radical ideas being put into our education system, almost independent now of whether or not it's in public school or in private school. And for me, it wasn't even a choice. So when I look at kind of my mission over the next 40 to 50 years, I realize it's to make sure that I hand off a better state, a better city, a better country for my daughter than was handed to me by my father and by his parents.
Mayor Giuliani, a softball question. Woke bureaucrats in the administration of Mayor Eric Adams want to outlaw pizza ovens that are fueled by either wood or coal. This bureaucratic nightmare would mean that classic pizza places, the emporiums of the greatest pizza on earth, we're talking Luigi's Pizza, we're talking Tantano's, Della Rocco's, Grimaldi's, Lucali, DeFara, John's of Bleecker Street. I mean, these are temples of great pizza. They would be no more. Is this the most ridiculous thing you've ever heard?
You know, Roger, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I would never think this, but I think it's almost on purpose to try to wipe out our culture. If I look at what they've been doing for the last 10, 12 years, even before we noticed it, the organized, progressive, left-wing, Marxist-influenced Democrats, they're doing everything they can to wipe out our culture, whether it's trying to take down Theodore Roosevelt's statue or Jefferson's statue, or in our case, I mean, pizza is part of what defines New York. It's one of the reasons people come to New York for the best pizza in the world, and these people are anti-American. All you have to do is read Soros, and you can see he is vehemently anti-American nationalism because he wants us to meld into one world. Beyond it, it's also part of the climate culture insanity, the cult of climate change. The small amount of carbon emitted by all of these ovens over a 1 year period is just one trip on John Kerry's airplane. And it's ridiculous. It makes no sense scientifically. I think it's done, for political purposes because, we're the deplorable enemy and they can go after Italian Americans. I mean, after all, they go after people who like the Latin Mass. What the heck's that all about?
No, you're absolutely
right. You like the
right.
Latin Mass? You're a terrorist?
I think they want to outlaw anything in which we find enjoyment, in all honesty. I think that's a part of it. The idea that you would take down the statue of Theodore Roosevelt in front of the Museum of Natural History. Theodore Roosevelt, who, by the way, was widely criticized for inviting Booker T. Washington to dine at the White House. Theodore Roosevelt, who believed in the equality of all men.
His family fought in the Civil War to free the slaves. I mean, it's ridiculous.
But it is the woke culture. Andrew, you have been all over the state. I think that the Republican nominee, Mr. Zeldin, ran a valiant effort. But in all honesty, do you think it is possible for New York Republicans to elect a statewide candidate again? I mean, between the level of cheating, the level of illegals, and the changing demographics of New York State, is it possible to win a statewide race?
Well, let me answer it with the numbers, first of all. So, on the campaign trail, when I was and my team were looking at numbers in terms of what we would need to pull in New York City, and this wasn't just me. I remember hearing campaign speeches by Congressman Zeldin and Rob Astorino and Harry Wilson as well, talking about what the Republican needed to do in New York City specifically. The target was 30 to 35%. My target was 35% plus in New York City because I knew that you had more people that had moved out of New York City, more Republicans, and you'd seen that in terms of upstate, we had lost a lot of the northern part of New York, a lot of central New York. We had lost a lot of red areas in New York. Congressman Zeldin, in order to have won, if everything else was the same in the other 57 counties of New York, and if we look at the 5 counties of New York City, he would have needed to have pulled 39% of New York City. He cracked 30%, he would have needed 39%. So look, if you go back and look and think that just a few years ago, we've had, 20 years of consecutive, we'll say, non-democratic mayors, and obviously 4 consecutive terms of Republican mayors in New York. Whatever you think about Mike Bloomberg now, he ran as a Republican, won as a Republican for 2 of those terms, and then obviously in his 3rd term ran and won as an independent. So yes, it is possible, but you kind of need to hit the inside straight, if you will. I think looking at it from a political standpoint, you'll have more Democrats come out and vote if there's a Republican in the White House against the Republican candidate, let's say, in a midterm election, and vice versa. You'll have Democrats that are not as enthused to come on out and vote if you have a Democrat in the White House. So at least looking forward to 2026, if you have a Republican in the White House, like I know we're all pulling for President Trump, which, by the way, Roger, you did a fantastic job interviewing him a few weeks ago. I know you guys have been friends for 40 years plus, and you did a spectacular job. I listened to your interview in preparing for my interview, and kudos to you in doing that. But if you have President Trump in the White House, it becomes very difficult for a Republican to win statewide in New York. And that's not just because of President Trump. That's any Republican there. If a Democrat is in the White House, then probably a Republican has a better chance, just because you'll have Democrats that are not enthused to come on out. They're not having the national media that's going to continue to beat everybody over the head about how bad the Republican is for your state. And on top of the fact that you'll have Kathy Hochul continuing to push these policies that, as you said before, woke policies that are hurting our quality of life, not just in New York, but in the Binghamtons, the Rochesters, the Buffaloes. The thing that was amazing to me in really studying and learning the state was to see that in 2021, at least, both Binghamton and Rochester had the most murders in recorded history. So this isn't just a problem that existed in New York City. This existed all around the state in urban areas. So is it possible? Yes, but you need the right things to align in order to hit that, I think.
If you're just tuning in, folks, I have the Giuliani duo with me, former Mayor Rudy Giuliani, the greatest mayor in New York City history, and his son, Andrew Giuliani, whose show precedes mine here, right here at WABC Radio. And I'm honored to have both these gentlemen with us. You can tune in at 770 on the AM dial. You can also hear us at WABCradio.com. You can either listen live there, or you can download and listen to the show later. I recommend you go get the WABC Radio app, because that way you can listen to the great Sid Rosenberg, my good friend Frank Morano, if you're a night owl. Frank Morano's After Midnight show, always a winner. Larry Kudlow, the quarterback of President Donald Trump's successful effort to turbocharge the economy during his presidency. Of course, the Cats Roundtable, where John Katsimatidis every day at 5 breaks down the breaking news for you, particularly a table setter on Sunday mornings at 8 a.m. All of it available on the WABC Radio app. I really urge you to download that to your phone. Mayor Giuliani, you were mayor on September 11th, 2001, when al-Qaeda terrorists killed nearly 3,000 people by flying hijacked planes into the World Trade Center's 2 towers. You immediately took charge of the rescue and recovery efforts, acting extremely decisively and with extraordinary courage and poise under pressure to calm the city of New York. In appreciation of those leadership efforts, many called you America's mayor. Time magazine named you as Person of the Year. Queen Elizabeth II awarded you an honorary knighthood, so from now on I have to call you Sir Rudy Giuliani.
No, you don't.
On March 8th, 2002, the greatest mayor in New York City history received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from perhaps the greatest, or maybe the second greatest president in American history, Ronald Reagan. Mayor Giuliani, when you were first told that these terrorists had attacked the World Trade Center, what's the first thing that came in your mind?
Well, when I first realized it was terrorists, because at first I didn't know whether it was my first notification was that a twin-engine plane had hit the North Tower. But when I walked out of the Peninsula Hotel where I was having breakfast, and I saw the tremendous fire, my counsel, Denison Young, and I said, no, this has to be much worse. And then I was about a mile away when the second plane hit, and my police commissioner, Bernie Kerrick, called, and we knew immediately that it was al-Qaeda. You know, we had threats from bin Laden to the 2000 New Year's Eve celebration. We had consistent threats because some of his people were on trial just 4 blocks away from City Hall in the Southern District of New York. So we were expecting some kind of a terrorist act, but certainly not airplanes being used as missiles attacking our building. But at least we had the advantage of having an idea of who our enemy was. And I had a police commissioner who had spent a lot of time both in the military and doing policing in the Middle East, who understood Islamic terrorism well. So, I just said to myself, this is the worst thing I've ever faced. It's beyond anything I've ever done before. And I'm just going to have to put aside all emotion and pray to God that I make the right decision and use all the experience that I have and contain my emotions. And Bernie and I kind of hugged, agreed on that, and then we just made decisions and prayed to God they were right.
You refer, of course, to former Police Commissioner Bernard Kerik, perhaps the greatest police commissioner in New York City history. God, I wish we had him back now.
Wow. Do I wish we had him back? Of course, every day.
The current mayor doesn't seem to be able to find a police commissioner whose brother is not a convicted felon.
I would take in a minute the great police commissioner Ray Kelly, who Bloomberg had, great police commissioner, or Howard Safer or Bratton, the two that I had. I mean, these were all four. You'd have to have like an interesting argument like you do in baseball, who's greater, who's better. But that's what you need, not people who let people out of jail and the police are dispirited and they don't feel like they're supported. And it's a terrible thing. I mean, morale has a lot more to do with policing than people realize because they are, a somewhat military organization. And when they're led by these people like a Biden or a Adams and even though Adams was a police officer, he really wasn't. And the cops know that. I mean, he was sort of a leader of 100 black men in law enforcement who would constantly raise issues, some valid and a lot invalid, to get himself publicity. But I can't remember an arrest that he ever made. So it's not like he played himself as a real cop. But real cops know he's not a real cop. Right?
Well, unfortunately...
And he makes absurd decisions. He makes silly decisions.
Unfortunately, Eric Adams writes in his biography that while he was a New York police captain, he provided personal private security for Mike Tyson and for the Reverend Louis Farrakhan, both of them convicted felons, a clear violation of a rarely employed regulation of the NYPD, in which an officer is not allowed to consort with a person who in the past has or in the future might be involved in committing a crime. That regulation has been used to terminate the employment of my good friend, Officer Salvatore Greco, proud son of Staten Island, a cop with a 14-year unblemished record of service to the people of New York City, sometimes assigned to the graveyard shift in some of the most dangerous precincts of New York, who literally was terminated, loses his pension, doesn't get a good conduct letter, so he can't get a job as a police officer in any other jurisdiction. And now Mayor Adams has moved to seal his disciplinary records because what they would show is when he was investigated for violating the same regulation, they docked his vacation time by 5 days. Now add insult to injury. Cardi B, a convicted criminal, a rapper who records songs about killing cops, she's invited to address the New York City Police Academy, an obvious violation of the same regulation. When asked about this, Mayor Adams says, oh, well, that was court-ordered community service. Really, Mayor? Show us the court order, Mayor. We'd like to see that court order. It doesn't exist. It's just another egregious example of the two-tier justice system in which an officer who, on his days off, had the right to support Donald Trump and a right to be a friend to me and my wife when we were going through tough times, he gets fired. But Eric Adams, he pays no penalty. And Cardi B, she's a celebrity, so there's different rules for her. Yeah, the whole thing is outrageous. Folks can go to helpthisnYcop.com if they want to read more about this. HelpthisnYcop.com. It is a just cause. Officer Salvatore Greco's in federal court now with a lawsuit, a civil suit, and I predict that he will prevail because what's being done to him is outrageously unfair.
By the way, Roger, too, I don't want to cut you off, but I have to tell you. Go ahead, Dad. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead, Andrew.
Well, I heard the interview that Sal did, I think a couple of days ago with Frank Morano earlier this week, and it was great. I'd recommend anybody go to WABCRadio.com to listen to that, but I remember hearing it overnight. I think I caught it the next morning, as a matter of fact. But I know you mentioned Frank Morano before. It's a very good interview that they did, and they get into a lot of that.
Well, in fact, Sal Greco was on Tucker Carlson. I think his next to last show, or maybe his third to last show, was a terrific interview. This guy's life has been turned upside down. He's lost everything, including his pension. He's moved to Florida, but he can't get a job as a police officer, which is really what he loves, because he doesn't have a good conduct letter over his termination in New York. It's entirely unfair, but we know how all of that works. Mayor Giuliani, the 2020 election, obviously highly controversial. You were a key figure in the Trump campaign's effort to challenge the results. Looking back, are you now able to share with our audience what, in hindsight, you see both as perhaps the biggest mistakes that were made in the challenge, but also the greatest successes from both a legal and political point of view?
Yeah, I think the mistake that was made is to go to the courts in the first place. I don't think we realized that there was going to be basically a shutdown in no hearings, not hearing any testimony. I've never witnessed that before. I mean, you go to court with a temporary restraining order, they listen to your witnesses. And even more than winning a particular case, my interest was getting the citizens on the record, because whether we were going to win now or in the future, you had to make a record of this. And these were not complaints of Donald Trump or me or you, or these were complaints of Mr. Jones and Mr. Smith, and who went to the polling place and were told they had already voted. I mean, 17,000 people went to the polling place in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and were told they had already voted. Republicans were shut out of observing over 600,000 ballots that were counted in Pennsylvania in front of them, but they were 2 football fields away. And even when Pam Bondi got an order to see them, the sheriff, a Democratic hack, said, I'm not enforcing it. So there was a clear conspiracy never to let us see a single ballot. We never got to see a single ballot. What we should have done immediately is gone to the legislatures and made our case there. And we did, but we were about 8 weeks late because we tried the courts. And luckily, the thing we were able to do with the legislatures was to document our case. So there are about 400 or 500 witnesses in one way or another that have either testified or submitted affidavits from which you can historically build a case of theft of the election. And then since then, there have been reports that have furthered that, 2,000 Mules, for example, being one of them. Their technology was not available to us at the time and would have taken 6 months to do. But there's been, in all the time that movie has been out, there hasn't been a single substantive criticism of one example they gave of someone stuffing a ballot box. It's just a general, it's been debunked. It's not true. The same thing that the Bidens have been saying for 5 years on all the evidence that's coming out against them. They've never been able to rebut a single one of those thousands and thousands of basically scientifically determined locations of these people who were stuffing the ballot box. So there's a plethora of evidence from the point of view of history that will show that it will definitely show that this election was the most interfered with and fraudulent in American history. And I think it'll show that Trump actually won. But actually, more importantly, it'll show a tremendous effort to cheat him. Now, you don't even need that. You can go back to covering up the hard drive as election fraud. What the heck was that all about? I mean, there was clear evidence of maybe 40 or 50 crimes by Joe Biden and his son that the FBI had already validated, and they allow this debate to go on as to whether it's valid or not. From a personal point of view, they allowed Biden to go on national television in a debate and accuse Donald Trump and me, personally using my name, of being a Russian agent. And that was Russian disinformation. They had determined 8 months earlier that it wasn't. And they don't even correct that. Barr doesn't correct it. So when I see Barr pontificating, you can imagine the reaction that I have when he sat on that information. I mean, that was election determinative. The American people knew half of what's in the hard drive before the election. I mean, even now when you go back and poll them, 10, 20% say they would have changed their vote.
Mayor Giuliani, of course, refers to Hunter Biden's laptop hard drive. By the way, folks, if you haven't seen that and you want to see it, you can go to MarcoPoloUSA.org, MarcoPoloUSA.org. That is a nonprofit organization that has very carefully and very accurately posted online and put together in print form all of Hunter Biden's laptop information. It is very carefully footnoted and annotated. There's no analysis here. This is straight fact. They did add footnotes to make it more understandable. If you have kids in the home, don't worry about the images. They have been blurred since some of them are extraordinarily pornographic and shocking. But I urge you to go to MarcoPoloUSA.org. Very expensive lawyers for Hunter Biden are now suing the Marco Polo organization in an attempt to silence them. So you can not only see the laptop there, you can actually order a printout of it, which is really, really compelling. But I also urge you to make a contribution. This is an 8-man band of freedom fighters, of truth tellers. Hunter Biden is spending literally millions of dollars on mean, nasty attorneys to threaten those who have the audacity to expose Hunter Biden's record.
ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track. And ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
Mayor, a follow-up question. Anthony Blinken, our current Secretary of State, there's a lot of evidence that he's the guy who went around and lined up the 51 current and former intelligence agency officials to co-sign a letter falsely claiming that Hunter Biden's laptop had, quote, all the hallmarks of Russian disinformation. Yet I see no accountability. I see no effort to hold our current failed Secretary of State responsible. What's your view on that?
Well, I mean, I'm obviously personally injured by that because I was the primary person they accused of being a Russian agent. I was the one who got the hard drive, along with Bob Costello, my lawyer. Everybody else wouldn't take it. If Bob and I hadn't gotten it, it wouldn't have come out. And there was nothing about it that was Russian. In fact, I mean, you could tell just from the letter that it was phony. When someone says it has the hallmarks of Russian disinformation, Roger, Andrew, and they don't give you a hallmark, like a single example, as a lawyer of 50 years, I can tell you they're lying. because the first thing you want to do is put together your 2 or 3 best examples that buries them. So they say it has the hallmarks of Russian disinformation. Like what? It's written in Russian? It has a Moscow stamp on it? What were the plus? They knew it was valid. The FBI had validated it 8 months earlier. They had to all know it. Most of them had access to classified information. So, I mean, these people are traitors.
It could be the second single greatest dirty trick in American history. The first one being the Russian collusion hoax. We now know, based on the long-delayed, slow-roll support of Special Counsel John Durham, that neither the DOJ, the CIA, or the FBI had any probable cause whatsoever to justify the opening of the Crossfire Hurricane counterintelligence investigation. They had no legal predicate for the appointment of Robert Mueller. They had no justification or legal rationale for the application for multiple FISA warrants so that they could spy on Donald Trump's campaign. This makes Watergate look like small potatoes. This is an abuse of power in which the full legal authority of the United States government and the extraordinary capability of our intelligence agencies were weaponized illegally and illicitly to launch an effort to remove a duly elected president. In fact, I would argue that it's treasonous. Yet, thanks to the slow motion operations of John Durham, the statute of limitations has passed and nobody will be prosecuted. Durham, to me, is an enigma. This guy prosecutes the people at the very lowest level of the Clinton crime family. It would be like charging the driver of the getaway car in a bank robbery for double parking, letting the bank robbers testify against him, thus incriminating themselves, but letting them keep the loot. It's really quite extraordinary. We have to move it along here. I got one more question for you, Andrew. You served as special assistant to President Trump. You spent a lot of time with him, watching him work through the administration and afterwards. You've played golf with him. You have a lot of experience on the golf course yourself. What is Donald Trump really like as a golfer? I think people underestimate his athleticism. What is he like as a golfer?
Well, I got to tell you, I played with him just a couple days after our interview last weekend, and he made 6 birdies in one round. It was actually the best round I've ever seen him play. So, Roger, I think you and I should both take credit for that because you interview him, I interview him a few short weeks later, and then all of a sudden his game is the best that I've ever seen. I actually told him, Roger, that I really hope his game gets a whole lot worse again in 2 years when he gets into president and he's too busy to work on his putting and his short game. But the truth is, I think, in all seriousness, in seeing him work every day for 4 years, I'll tell you one story that I think really encapsulates all of it. This is about a week after the country was shut down because of the pandemic. And we were at that point, there were a couple of all-nighters at the White House. And I think by that point, we were kind of doing 16 to 18-hour days. And I remember one night going home after midnight, getting home, and finally getting to bed around 1 o'clock. And I got a call on the bat phone, on the government phone there from the president at 2:27 in the morning. And it was only about a 4-minute call or so. And I wrote down the note, went back to bed, and I had set my alarm for 5:45. He calls me again at 5:23 in the morning. Again, another 2-minute call. He sounded just as awake as he had ever been. And I wrote down the exact same note, and I tried to go back to sleep for the next 15 minutes before my alarm was going to ring. And I just thought, does this guy ever sleep? It's amazing. And that's kind of the same way that I feel about my father. Roger, I know you have an incredible work ethic yourself. But I think that one of the things about President Trump was he understood just how important the role of president was, especially the people who had elected him, coming in as a populist, as somebody who was really going into, as he had said so many times on the campaign trail, drain the swamp of Washington, D.C. And I think maybe he didn't even realize, and I think all of us didn't even realize just how much he was up against, not just from the Democrats, but from the Republicans in his own party. I think going forward, and if he is in fact elected the president starting on January 20th, 2025, I think he's going to look not just at the opposite party, but people in his own party in Washington, D.C. And I think we might see the full draining of the swamp that we had not only hoped for, but had begun in the first term.
Yeah, I think we have an awakened Donald Trump who is both older but also wiser. And therefore, It's amazing how much he accomplished in his first term. Boom economy, rebuilding our military strength, scores of conservatives on the federal courts, reinstilling fear in our enemies around the world. Wait till you see what he does in a second term. You know, they asked Ronald Reagan at the end of his second term, they said, well, you didn't come from the world of government or politics. You didn't come from the military. Do you think your background as an actor was detrimental to your performance as president? He said, fellas, I don't see how a guy who wasn't an actor could ever do this job. I think President Trump understood that. We have to move this along. I want to thank Mayor Rudy Giuliani.
Thank you, Roger. Always a pleasure.
The greatest mayor in New York City history.
Thank you, Roger.
Andrew Giuliani, the future greatest governor of the state of New York, for joining us here on The Roger Stone Show.
This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.